afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining for wherever you are around the country or the world. We know we have some international visitors on the call today, so we welcome you. And we're looking at how to identify, locate and track risks in real time, specifically focusing on mobile duress. All right, so today's agenda, we'll be looking at a little bit of a history around in technology and where we've come from in our last several years, specifically focusing on this technology. We'll also then get into the history of ARISTA Flow and how it has developed its solutions specifically in this space over the last few years. Then we're going to jump into the issues of staff safety. Not necessarily we're going to cover them all, but we're going to cover most of the prominent ones that we hear about in the news today, and more so, unfortunately, more often than we want to. From there, we'll move into improving the response. This is about not really solving the problem, but it's more about making sure that we can understand the issues and how we can improve the process around safety in emergencies and hospitals and acute health centres.
That's exactly right.
Then we're going to duck into the actual product itself, the ARISTA Flow UVS solution. We're going to give you an overview on several deployment methods of the product. And then we'll duck into the last part of the conversation, we around several different use cases and popular use cases in healthcare. Finally, there'll be a Q&A session at the end. We will take questions throughout the presentation. So if you see at the bottom of your screen, you'll be able to see some hands that you can ask questions on. Moving on to the next slide, a little bit of history around in technology distribution. We were founded in Perth in 1999, so if you calculate that back to where we are today, that's almost 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So we've come a long way and been seeing a lot of different technologies and obviously ridden a lot of different technology waves over a period of time. But I must say the one that's stayed with us specifically and will continue to develop and stay with us over many years to come, I'm sure, is around the wireless and Wi-Fi space. Moving into what we do well and what we do best is around our RTLS and wireless and messaging services. These are a number of different services that are provided by InTechnology through our partner network in our ecosystem for our partners end users, as well as end users themselves where required. From our business is about making sure that our partners are enabled to be able to deliver some of these existing services, but also some of the new ones that are coming on board, such as wayfinding and blue dot experiences, which some of you may have heard about, and also things around different processes that we can see in hospitals, like surgical scanning, and taking away the errors that are happening in relation to leaving surgical instruments in places they shouldn't be. So some of the things that we do, and obviously there's other areas that we focus on, but this is specific to real-time location services and wireless and messaging services for the business.
I'll start talking a little bit about ARISTA Flow as a vendor that we represent here at InTechnology. ARISTA Flow has got a lot of experience within location services using a variety of different technologies. And as a US company, they've had a lot of experience in a wide variety of different markets as well, including healthcare, obviously, but also aerospace, manufacturing, as well as security and safe environments like penitentiary systems, jails and things like that. There's been obviously a lot of growth there. And obviously, as part of the acquisition of the Ekahau Location Services assets in 2017, ARISTA has been heavily focused on unifying the various technologies under a single banner. And certainly, we see this year as a banner year with the release, or the expected release of UVS version 7, which is going to allow and facilitate the migration of a lot of existing Vision customers, which is the Ekahau stream of products, into the UVS solution, which is going to add the ability to handle ADIS11N tags, modern technologies, multiple technologies like BLE that ARISTA has worked with in the past, all into a single unified environment. And the UVS there, the U stands for unified, and it's a good example of where ARISTA sees location services moving towards in the future. Now, I'll just touch briefly on the positioning of ARISTA Flow, just from a commercial point of view, so you know where we're coming from. ARISTA Flow is one of the leading challenges within the Gartner space in terms of the company that Gartner's looking at, and we have been for the last 2 years. And certainly we're in very good company there, and we are leading the pack around how to approach indoor location systems. And I think the fact that we're not a wireless vendor per se is a benefit in terms of being able to provide a wide variety of solutions for a wide variety of customers. So we're not linked in to any single vendor. Obviously, everyone likes Cisco and we work well with them and partner with them, and we are a Cisco partner. But obviously we can work with lots of different vendors, including those others in the marketplace. Now let's come to the topic at hand for this webinar, staff safety. It is a real issue. And the key thing and key goal of staff safety is having a solution around this, or a process around this, fundamentally is about that number one point, saving lives. And if you look at some of the statistics we've found, and I was re-informing myself this morning before this webinar, and it's unfortunately very sobering how long staff safety has been an issue for. We looked at that here in 2005. Almost every single nurse has had an issue, if not multiple issues of aggression around that time. And those stats haven't fundamentally changed. Looking at reports, a lot of the healthcare reports in the healthcare environment, hospitals, aged care, and those areas, emergency departments are a key area where violence is an issue that affects healthcare workers. And most hospital workers will experience that at some point during their workplace, at least multiple times. Now, that kind of issue is at its core about people and people's approaches when they're intoxicated or under medical duress or psychological stress. Violence is an unfortunate side effect. That's not something we can solve, and that's obviously not what we're here today to do. What we are here today to do is to focus on looking at how we can mitigate the impact of these kinds of situations. We may not be able to remove the problem, but certainly by dealing with the problem effectively, and we can increase the safety to staff, as well as increase satisfaction of staff in the execution of their job, as well as the side effect or other effect of having increased patient satisfaction as well. When you have happier staff, you have happier patients, as a general rule. And that can also mean if you keep your staff for longer, the overall processes are much more beneficial. Now, these are just some examples. These are two articles, one from 2011, one from 2019. The story is pretty much the same. And I'll note there, even in the recent article on the right-hand side, you can see there's an underreporting of violence. And we'll touch on that when we talk about how UVS actually tackles the process of responding to staff safety issues and staff duress. Now, when we talk about solution, I'm talking about the solution to responding to the problem. And the key issue here is response times. And we see that in a lot of the documents around the state departments. When they look at this issue, their primary goal is to reduce response times. Because what happens then is that we can decrease the likelihood of injury and decrease the likelihood of death. And it sounds quite serious, but certainly the solutions themselves can be really effective towards decreasing that to the point where people don't have to be afraid anymore. And that's a key strength of any kind of location awareness system. When you have a panic button or a silence alarm, it's actually associated with lower rates of physical violence. One of the reasons for that is that if you are in a conversation with someone and the situation is escalating, being able to trigger a button without necessarily aggravating the situation is often a very effective way of bringing in additional people who can de-escalate. There's discussions going on in various health departments in Australia around grey alerts. We're having special response teams to be able to assist with the de-escalation process, because what we're finding is the standard training isn't working. Another aspect of location awareness is that if you have a wearable tag, it's far easier to trigger, and we see this not just in the hospital space, but also in aged care. When you give a wearable button or a nurse call button to an elderly person, odds are 90% of the time they're going to press that button that's in range rather than if they can't reach the wall or can't reach a wall button. Now, the benefit of having a tag around you using either Bluetooth or Wi-Fi is all about providing information to reduce that response time. It's all about identifying who needs to be notified. So having a digital system means that you can know based on the location who needs to respond. There's no point talking to security that's on another site. We want to talk to security that's at the facility itself, and also talking about the nurse in charge, nurse unit manager. If they're around or if they're not around, you can make sure that the escalation process is as efficient and time efficient as possible. But you can also have other integrations as well. You can have it displayed on nurse call systems, and you can have it notifying security alerts. You can also integrate with camera systems for real-time correlation of duress systems. We see that used in correctional facilities and high care mental institutions as well. You can also send mass notifications, something that a fixed duress system can't do. Obviously, nurse call can, but if you don't know where your staff are and they're not in a position to look at a screen, you can still send them alerts. So the effective response times in those scenarios can be far well improved as well. You can also have receipt confirmation. We're talking about if someone is responding or whether someone is unable to respond. You can log those. And that's a lot of information you can use in your reporting in those workflows after the event, which is quite useful as well. Now, wearable tags also have most of them have the capability to trigger man-down alerts. So if someone trips or falls rather than being attacked, that can be integrated into the solution to provide immediate assistance rather than waiting or having someone needing to yell out for help. Now, this is an example for those of you who may not have seen one of these. Now, if you have ever been to a New South Wales health site, odds are you've seen the staff wear a B4 tag because it's part of the standard safety procedures that New South Wales has implemented is the ARISTA Flow B4 tag. Because it has the man-down functionality, it has two-way messaging you can see on the screen, and it has programmable buttons. As well as the key element here is the safety switch, which is a very unique feature among a lot of wearable tags. The safety switch functionality is really useful for providing an immediate pull. So people don't have to think, and we often see, okay, well, why aren't we using a mobile phone? It's often a very common question we get asked. Well, if you've ever tried to use a mobile phone, well, if I pull my phone out of my pocket now, I'm going to have to use my finger to unlock it, so I need to get my finger in place. Or I need to swipe an unlock code if I've got it properly secured, which in the healthcare environment you should do with your devices. That's 5 seconds right there. I'm going to tell my person attacking me, hold on, I'm going to have to unlock my phone and have to bring up the app. I have to look at the screen. Hopefully I don't drop the phone because they're slippery these days. You can see all the different problems that immediately come up when you're just trying to trigger a duress. However, with the B4 tag, all you have to do is pull. One action, very quickly, and gets an immediate response. So you can very quickly see the benefits of having a dedicated duress option. The rechargeable battery is quite useful as well. It'll go for extended shifts. So if you do have those people who are working quite long hours, you don't have the problem of them having to switch tags. You can have dedicate tags to individual staff to assist with responders and those kinds of logical organizations. It's a very powerful tool. So let's talk a little bit more about the use case and how that actually flows in practice. So in this case, let's talk about a problem of the sound. So if you have any sound issues or anything like that, please let us know and we'll see what we can do to improve it. The core problem, obviously, if it's a psychiatric patient or an intoxicated patient, they can pose a big problem in terms of handling, particularly those that are on illicit substances. That can be very hard to deal with and very hard to talk down as well. So often it very quickly escalates beyond the ability to manage the situation by one person. And if someone does get attacked, then they don't often have the opportunity to call for help visually. If it's after hours or it's a very busy environment, other people will be occupied with their work. So by having a B4 on every staff member, it means that they always have their panic button with them. They can have different mechanisms. You can have a silence alert on a button if the problem has not yet escalated to physical violence, or if it does, then you can have either the man down if they get knocked out, or the safety switch pulled to get an immediate notification anywhere in the healthcare environment. And so what that means is that other B4 tags, for those staff who are working with patients, working with staff in offices and meetings, will get messages into them saying which tag got pulled, where it got pulled, and what kind of event. So that people immediately know what reaction to have. And we see many hospitals implement a variety of different actions. For those who are immediate responders, they'll obviously come to the critical situation location. For others, it may be the case that they may want to vacate the location to reduce the risk to other staff and patients. And so if you have good processes in place, when you know where the location is, you can train your staff to be very effective and reduce that response time. Now, the force purchase is obviously one option. There are many different ways. Once you've got that workflow in place, The UVS solution provides lots of different ways of improving the reporting. If you notice, if you recall from an article we saw earlier this year, the under-reporting process. In 2016, there was a study done, and they asked the nurses, well, why is it under-reported? And the main driver of feedback there was the cumbersome nature of auditing. Now, as you can see in the screenshot below, on screen, there is a very simplistic workflow designed by AiRISTA in UVS to facilitate very simple follow-ups to duress. As you can see, there's an accept and decline, there's a simple comment field. Within seconds, a staff member or a nursing unit manager can log and audit events and see who's responded, which is automatically recorded based on the acknowledgements, where they went to and where the event happened. Now, a lot of the information being automatically collected means that the reporting is quite fine-grained, but also very intuitive, which gives you the ability to catalogue the issues as well as be able to see holistically, okay, how can we improve our responses and how can we try and work towards reducing the highest risk environment, which, as we said, is a lot of plans in emergency departments. So we can do things like forensic replay. When you are recording the location of the duress and the responders, you can see where are they coming from, where are they going, where is it happening? Is it happening in the actual consult rooms, or is it happening in the open emergency department? Is it happening in the corridors or in the rooms or in the walls? Is it happening in transit? All these questions you can answer and visualize through the UVS platform, which is really, really powerful. And that empowers decision makers and stakeholders to take control of the situation without feeling like they're a bit lost. Now, you can do single multiple map views. In Australia, we have a lot of health districts and health networks where a lot of the services, particularly in regional environments, the people in charge aren't necessarily on site every day of the week because there's just not enough places to be, or too many places to be during the week. To be able to have a centralised system where you can look at multiple facilities and get holistic statistics is a really powerful part of the UVS approach to this problem. Obviously, when you've got your dashboards and those kind of elements, you can get real-time information as well as holistic information over time. The longer you have the system in place, the more information you have to make good decisions to try and prevent these problems happening in the future. Now, UVS is the ARISTA's solution around the software side of the solution. Obviously, the B4 tag is the hardware side, and it can run over either BLE networks, or an ARISTA Flow BLE network, which we'll cover, or any kind of third-party Wi-Fi network. But behind all of that is the UVS solution. Because it's a single platform for different technologies, it doesn't really matter what you roll out. Obviously, if you've got a B4 tag and a ARISTA tag which has duress, you can use either Bluetooth or Wi-Fi or a combination of the two and get single unified results. You can have it on mobile devices, you can have it with data mining, obviously, as I said before, as well as true business intelligence at a very high level as well as a low level. Now, I've talked about these as well. The real-time and interactive nature, you can get a real-time duress, or you can look at duresses that happened last week, the last month, the last 6 months, as long as you've got your database there retaining all that information. Now, this is a quick snapshot of the UVS solution. Obviously, there's lots of different elements. I'm going to point out a couple of key points. I won't go into every detail. One aspect I want to highlight is GPS integration. So the devices that are supported by the UVS system include not just the ARISTA Flow tags, which you'll see some pictures of later, but also third-party GPS devices, smartphone inputs, sensors like temperature sensors, as well as passive RFID and active RFID solutions as well. Now, because we cover all those different technologies and we're feeding in as a single data collection and location service source, there's a uniformity there that no other vendor can match. When you're dealing with pure Wi-Fi and pure BLE, often they're siloed solutions which require quite complicated back integration. However, with UVS, with the data collection event processing, it's very easy to make it a single point of communication for your location services and be able to leverage that in not just duress, but lots of other workflows. And so you can expand an existing duress system into asset tracking or temperature monitoring, hand hygiene compliance, and all those other elements where location can be quite useful to expanding the efficiencies of those operations. Now, the centralized UVS solution, you can have it, depending on the technology you're using, you can have it down to the bed level if you wanted to, so you can keep track of where your patients are, where your assets are going, where they're getting used. You can keep it at the doors, so on transit. You can also have room level, building level, and even a very high level of granularity. So you can look at one facility versus another and try and identify and process and analyse the efficiencies, both in direct services as well as in other services as well. I touched on the hardware, so these are a couple of different examples here. You can see the temperature tags in the middle, the V4 tag obviously, but we also have asset tags, as well as hand hygiene tags as well. So the picture you're seeing there is an asset tag retrofitted to a soap dispenser. It's a good way of keeping track of hand hygiene, which is a known issue around infections, and hospitals have entire infection control teams dedicated towards improving hand hygiene. When you can automate that process through the UVS solution, it's really, really useful. Now I might skip over some of these highlights. I might come back to these during the Q&A. But in order to implement the UVS system, you don't need to have that much infrastructure. Obviously, you need the ARISTA tags, you need a Wi-Fi network, you need the backend software. That's pretty much it. There's obviously services involved in terms of the calibration and the configuration process, but once that's in place, you can leverage the Wi-Fi network and the software and add as many kind of devices. So you can deploy it in emergency departments for safety and duress, and expand that towards asset tracking and temperature monitoring without having to re-implement your Wi-Fi network or redo your software. It's a really nice expansion. When it comes to Bluetooth, ARISTA has developed a full platform around Bluetooth integration, which allows us to provide very clear location services. We can have zone-based activities, as well as be able to provide bed-level services as well. Follow to the background noise, right? Just give it a moment. Okay, I think that's gone now. Apologies for that. So the full Bluetooth solution can be integrated into the UVS system and run in parallel to a wireless network. Obviously, if you would like more information, all we pretty much need is a floor plan and some information about the use case, and we'll be able to provide you with a more detailed overview of how Bluetooth can fulfill a lot of the location needs that your solution may have. And it can be used in duress just as well. So the V4 tag and the latest release has Bluetooth support as well as Wi-Fi support. So you can choose based on your environmental requirements how accurate you want to be. On the larger scale, we can also talk about the scalability and redundancy. When you have a healthcare system, you need it to be up. There's no point having a duress system that's reliant upon infrastructure that goes down every 5 minutes or every half a day. So the reliability and redundancy of UVS is part of the solution itself, so it's really powerful. That wraps up in terms of the staff safety and duress. I'll touch on a couple of other use cases that I've mentioned in passing before, and these are going to be the subject of webinars going on this week and next week and coming up in the future weeks as well. We're talking about asset tracking. I'm just going to highlight these. When you talk about asset tracking, what do we talk about? We're talking about needing to find very expensive equipment. I see when I go to hospitals all the time, rows and rows of IV pumps, of wheelchairs, of beds that are just stashed in alcoves because nurses are worried that if they don't stash it somewhere, it's going to go missing because someone else is going to take it. And wheelchairs are a common expense hospitals have because patients accidentally or on purpose will take them home and when they leave the car park. To be able to track assets is a really useful part, and obviously location services are key towards that. The hand hygiene compliance is another scenario, which again, where location is critical. In this case, it's about linking the location of your dispensers to the location of your staff. And obviously ensuring that people are washing their hands on a regular basis. The 5 points of contact, 5 points of hand hygiene is something that you can automate the analysis and direction of. You can also prompt staff to make sure that they wash their hands as well through the two-way messaging that V4 tag supports. And again, UVS has that as a standard workflow. Patient safety, when you're talking about being able to have a man-down detection, that applies more often to patients than it does to staff in practice. If a patient slips and falls or they need assistance, be able to have a wearable tag, not necessarily having messaging or not, is an extremely useful part of the UVS solution, which you can use to enhance and extend your staff duress response time and obviously increase your patient satisfaction, as well as your patient outcomes as well. Temperature management, We all know what goes into a fridge, medication, and medication can be very expensive, PBS or otherwise. And so having a failing freezer or fridge can be a real cost issue and also affect patient outcomes. If you've run out of vaccines because your fridge has failed, that's an issue for health as well. Wandering patient is another one, and you have dementia patients that need to stay in the ward. I get a lot of stories about nice little old ladies and general visitors being very kind and opening the door, but they don't realise that that person actually shouldn't be allowed outside because they might not be able to find their way back. To be able to track wandering patients, be able to assist them either before they get lost or while they get lost within the facility can really increase patient safety and obviously reduce the level of staff overhead in monitoring as well. Now we'll just review the questions. Jason, did you want to go through them?
Thanks, Armin. Very comprehensive and spot on time, just on 30 minutes for that. So, look, there is a few questions that have been raised. One specifically around, can ARISTA do outdoor location? How does it do it? So you mentioned that in the GPS a few slides back, but is there a different way that ARISTA achieves this?
So it depends on outdoor within the facility, or you could define that in two different areas. There's on campus and off campus. And off campus, we see a lot of interest in the lone worker support. The biggest challenge we have in off-campus lone worker support is the lack of 4G services in regional areas. However, there's workflows we can have. And the nice thing about the UVS solution, because it supports different technologies, if you have a mobile phone that has GPS and mobile service support and Wi-Fi, and they have a B4 tag and using Wi-Fi on campus, you can obviously have outdoor access points for your on-campus services and use the same B4 you've got for all your other workloads. When they leave site, you can attribute the mobile phone to the same person. So you can have multiple assets or multiple devices linked to the same person to provide continuity of location. And UVS has a standard feature where you can overlay the GPS details next to the location of the Wi-Fi details. So certainly there is a solution in place. We are working with Australian vendors, a number of Australian vendors to build a combined solution around GPS-based tracking in for lone workers. Certainly if that is something interesting to you, we can take that offline, certainly discuss that with you. But certainly the combination of GPS with mobile services for the data backhaul and Wi-Fi for on-campus allows a very seamless solution to be implemented.
Great, thanks, Simon. I think that covers that one in both angles. You mentioned the B4 tag has a BLE capability. Is that available now, is the question?
I'd have to double check on our shipment levels, but I believe it's going to come in the second half of this year in terms of the B4s are going to be released. They're going to have the BLE functionality built in. We're already seeing that in the upgraded W4 tags, so the wrist ones for patients with BLE functionality. They're already out. The B4s are on the next on the list, next couple of brands. So.
Sort of, but leads really well into the next question is, if it was you deploying a network in today's world, would you go BLE or Wi-Fi for this technology?
That's a very good question. I thank the attendee for asking that one. So when you're dealing with the choice between BLE and Wi-Fi, it comes down to cost versus benefit, as everything does. The benefits of BLE are such that you can get a very high degree of accuracy, and you can get centimetre level with UVS BLE solution. However, quite often the cost involved in getting centimetres in a whole facility can be quite prohibitive. So what we often recommend is to have BLE in localised areas, have it, for example, in the emergency department or in spaces where you need that level of accuracy. And you can fall back, because the B4 tag, as an example, the W4 tag have both BLE and Wi-Fi built in. You can have Wi-Fi for your room level and ward level services or asset tracking, and use BLE for your very fine degree of location application, all in a single platform. Okay. But it really comes down to how accurate you need it to be and how much infrastructure can you put in place.
And how would you determine that level of accuracy?
It comes down to the use case. So in the case of staff duress, the question I always ask is, how quickly can someone respond? It's all about the concept that we've come up with called functional accuracy. So does the accuracy of the solution meet the purpose? Asset tracking, generally speaking, you don't need to get it to the centimetre. We're not doing surgery here. If an IV pump is in a room or in the corridor, usually that's enough. So we generally don't need BLE for that. However, hand hygiene, we need to get very close to the dispenser. We don't want to think that someone 2 metres away has got very long arms to wash their hands with. And so BLE is much more critical for that kind of application. But then you don't have hand hygiene, you don't have dispensers every 1 metre. You've got them in localised areas, so you can localise that kind of BLE solution. So those are 2 examples where you can swing one way or the other.
Okay, given that scenario, then what about wideband or IR in those impacts?
IR has some fundamental limitations in the Australian environment. We do support IR, obviously, as you saw the IR beacons, but where IR used to be the go-to technology, BLE has replaced that fundamentally. When it comes to ultra-wideband, the biggest challenge there, and also its benefit there, is it has very good range and very good battery life, but it has relatively low accuracy. And in order to get the level of accuracy you can obtain with both BLE and Wi-Fi, you need to have a lot more infrastructure of ultra-wideband. And when it comes to, and obviously we're talking about active RFID, using active tags for the ultra-wideband space, we find the accuracy tends to be subpar and not suitable for duress requirements.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going back to more around the security side of things now. There's a question around building management systems, and do you integrate or work with building management systems in a duress situation?
Yes, so part of the, as I mentioned during the use case discussion, we can integrate UVS on the back end with lots of different third-party systems. The ones we see most commonly are nurse call and security, but certainly we see a lot of interest in integrating with the building management system, particularly for small sites where having 3 different systems is too cost prohibitive. So we can integrate with any kind of IP-based system for notifications or even for bidirectional communication as well. And that comes down to not just duress, but also things like temperature monitoring. If you want to combine your fridge monitoring with ambient temperature monitoring from the BMS system, that's something that can be achieved.
Okay. Can you make your system work with a physical security system?
So
I'd use an example. So for instance, I know, for instance, we work with Honeywell. Mm-hmm. How does that work?
So that integration with other technologies like physical security systems is done on the back-end side of things. Obviously, when you're dealing with a combination of mobile duress with the P4 and fixed duress, having good messaging between the two provides continuity of service. And so we can do that integration if it's an IP-based system, and most are these days. We can provide that integration through the UVS platform. It's quite extensible on that basis. Okay. To give more a specific answer, I'd need to know the vendor, and that's more of an offline discussion.
Certainly. Well, that pretty much comes to the end of our questions. If there's anybody on the call that would like to ask any more, we'll give another 30 seconds. But Armin, just as a quick wrap up, in relation to what we've just exposed today to the listeners, what's your overall, I suppose, common theme when it comes to talking about staff and mobile duress? I mean, what are we trying to achieve here? What's the ultimate aim?
When anybody's having a discussion about staff duress, the question you should be asking is not what is the meterage we should be getting, but will this save a life? Yeah. And when it comes to the practical application of any kind of staff safety system, that's always the core question we need to be answering. There are many different ways to save a life, and that is often very location specific. Depends on who's there to respond. Is it late at night, during the day? But we can answer all those questions based on assessing the environment with that end goal in mind.
Okay. Great, good summary, thank you. We've got a couple more questions that have just come in just on that. Do you integrate with any other clinical messaging systems such as the likes of a Telmatic or a Perfect Serve or something along those lines?
So when it comes to clinical messaging systems, we can do integration for that, and that's just like any other third-party system. So when you have a message being triggered from a B4 or from a staff safety, or if it's a nurse call system, you can have that logged within a clinical messaging system like Telmatic or Perfect Serve. When it comes to the other way around, if you wanted to send a message to a staff person, you can, with the B4 supporting 40 characters, you can have an SMS style notification being derived or generated out of the Telmatic system as well.
So for instance, where Telmatic is like a digital version of a pager system these days. Is that where you could interact?
Oh yes, so the combination of the B4 messaging platform out of UVS and the telematics system, we can completely replace pages in practice for on-site services.
Okay, fantastic. What about newer technologies like digital wayfinding, such as Connexion?
This is where UVS's BLE platform really shows into its strength. We talked about BLE and Wi-Fi as an example. The benefit of using BLE for duress is that the same infrastructure can be reused for things like wayfinding with solutions that we represent like Connexion. So when you have like very good location being provided in areas with BLE, they can serve both purposes at the same time without doubling up on your infrastructure. So your return on investment can be significantly enhanced by combining BLE for duress and BLE for wayfinding.
Fantastic. Well, that sounds like you cover off a number of different use cases and also requirements using the same infrastructure, which is what people want to try and achieve all the time.
That's right. Every single customer is looking to consolidate, to minimise the amount of investment, because every single device that goes in is a cable that has to be wired up, something that has to have its power supplied, and obviously has to be maintained.
So I think that wraps us up. I'd like to thank you for your contribution. It was great. Thanks everybody for the questions that you've asked. They've been excellent. And thank you for joining us today and spending the last 45 minutes with us today learning about staff safety and mobile duress. Have a great day, and we'll see you on the next call. Thank you.